I'm sorry, continue, we're working on the same.
That's okay. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment this evening?
No, ma'am.
Finances, nothing to report this month, correct? Academics,
We are going to do a quick update for academics real quick.
okay. Ms. Moore?
Hello, yes. So we've got some really cool stuff going on at Clover Garden, and I'm just going to take like 30 seconds to give you the rundown of all the things in your principal's report. So the first thing, on November 20th, we had our teachers come back on campus for another face-to-face update, and they were able to have a one-on-one Q&A session with Dr. Vaughn, who y'all have talked with, our epidemiologist, so that was really cool. Wanted to give you an enrollment update. So currently we have 641 students enrolled at Clover Garden, and our wait list is 590. For the Hero Builder, we're still doing our character program here at Clover Garden, and I was actually invited to be a part of a podcast, and so that podcast has been published or put out, and so here's just a link for you to know all about that. It's really about our teachers and what they're doing here. And then they also asked about my heroes. So there's a little bit there. Ag in the Classroom, there is a blog on our website. Every single month, I put something out there about an agricultural thing in North Carolina. And actually, I wanted to let y'all know that that's been picked up by the NC Farm Bureau Ag in the Classroom and by the Alamance County Farm Bureau's Women's Committee. They are sharing that out to their people and encouraging other educators to do the same thing. Clover Garden has launched our brand new clothing line, and it is gorgeous. So we're super excited about that. Our enrollment committee is planning an awesome event for our families on December the 18th from 5 to 6:30. It's a Winter Wonderland. We're having a reverse parade. So we are encouraging all of our families to come out and just enjoy, ride through our car line, to see lights and blow-ups, and so to hear some Christmas music. And also at the end, our PTT is sponsoring a really cool surprise for all of our students. We're excited about that. And then the last thing I wanted to let you know about is our Grizzly Ugly Sweater Contest. So if you are interested in participating in this, please send a picture of you in your ugliest Christmas sweater to Miss Alcon. And we are going to have a voting event, and the winner will be announced on the 18th of December. So that's all I have for our update. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Old business, grade, category, and weights.
That's me. So last time that you guys had asked about the data and showing that. So somewhere in your packet, I don't know what page it's on, you'll see a detailed graph and sheet on exactly what you asked. So current grade and absolute grades from Q1 of this remote learning school year, because that was what I personally had access to through Canvas and was able to just do that myself and not have to bother the teachers with one more thing added to their list to get back to me. So you can see with what a current student and a low, mid, and high level achieving student, what their current grade was for Q1, and with the new grading categories and weights, what their grade would have been for Q1 with that. And there's a little key about whether it went up, it stayed the same, or it went down. And then really just kind of some backstory. After I did this and really kind of looked at the data, as you can probably tell, it doesn't really say much. There's nothing really that jumps out at you. There's nothing really that screams, yo, we need to do this and do it now. So then that led me to more conversations with our teachers and kind of asking them, well then, if it's not going to change their grade that much, asking that question, then why do it? Why not do it? Why do we want to do this? And that is why Ms. Paler and I have asked Mr. Cheek, because he is a much better expert at this than myself. And he has, he has volunteered to come and kind of speak on our behalf and on all of our behalfs about that. And on the next page with that, you'll see some of the talking points that he will go over. Maybe. Somewhere. No, that one.
First two.
Okay, yeah, it's 2 pages. Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, I got one. No, I got two.
All right, I guess I'm Jason Cheek, I teach math here, this is my second year at Clover Garden Hall at Emily, and I teach math right up there, right above us, except I don't teach it there this year. I teach it from home and gas stations and wherever I can teach it from. But anyway, when I first got here, the grading percentages were, originally 42, 42, 16. 42% for a certain category of testing quizzes, 42% for classwork and projects, and 16 for homework. And I was a little shocked to find out that, these testing or test quizzes percentages and all this stuff goes from 6th grade to 12th grade. It's not really differentiated by course. It's not differentiated by age of student or whatever. And so I'm kind of looking at that going, well, that's not really, I think, the way we want to go. And some of us kind of put our heads together and say, I think maybe there's a better way of doing it. And certainly, I think you got to look at what's your core philosophy of assessing students. I mean, like, how do you think that should be done? And as a teacher with some experience, I believe that you should assess students based on their mastery of course content. And really, that's it. I mean, how they convey to me that they've mastered math, or how they convey to Emily that they mastered science, or whatever subject you're teaching. And so sometimes tests, quizzes, homework, projects, and classwork may not be the best assessment tools to use in certain classes. For example, Emily, she's teaching science. I mean, clearly in the science class, especially in the math science classes in high school, you're going to do labs. And there's really no place to put the lab. She can put the lab in, but it's a little bit not transparent. There's no percentage for labs or whatever. Me personally, for math, I've taught for 23 years, and I never really graded classwork. And I give my kids work to do in class. We do small group work, and we practice things and back and forth. But when I saw 42% of a grade counting as classwork and projects, I thought, well, I don't really need that. And it's not really a tool that I need here. I mean, in terms of projects, I might give a project from time to time. But you think about it, 42%. Projects, I mean, you need to give enough projects to fill up the 42% to make it count for something. And if your course is not project based, then it might not be the smartest way to go. And I look at other courses like dance and band and art and chorus. I mean, those are more performance based. I don't know. I'm not a band director. I mean, I was in band. I'm not a chorus teacher, so I can't stand up here and tell you that this is the best way to assess a chorus student. That's not my level of expertise. But it seems to me that you got to turn these things over to the teachers. Those are the experts in the field. They know how to assess students. I mean, that's why we hired them to teach the class and assess the students' understanding of the course material. And to me, the teachers need a little bit more autonomy than just a blanket statement that 6th grade through 12th grade is all going to be the same way, when inherently the kids are different, the classes are different, the courses are different, the subjects are different. So that's really where this all comes from, is that we just decided that we needed to do something a bit different. And to talk about the grades, Emily sent that data to me and asked me to make some sense of it or whatever. And I honestly believe that whether or not this changes a kid's grade, that's really not the question to ask. I mean, that, to me, a kid's grade is important, but whenever you look at a grading protocol, you don't come up with a grading protocol based on the fact that every kid's grade is going to go up. That's not the reason that we want to change. We're not trying to, I'm certainly not going home and hatching a plan to fail all my kids, but I'm also not going to go home and hatch a plan to make sure that every kid gets an A. That's not the goal of teaching and learning. I don't think the goal of teaching and learning is exactly that. I mean, it's to master the course content that I'm presenting to the student. And so, in my class, you can see, I don't know if you have the percentages broken down, but in the math, we decided to do tests and quizzes. I think we decided to differentiate it based on level, like honors or standard or AP. I'm not sure if they have a sheet or not.
It was in the last month.
Okay.
It's not in there.
Okay. And so every single subject kind of, met and decided what would be best for their particular subject. I think, in English or history, there might be some more writing assessments. I don't know. Of course, like I said, in band and art, more performance-based or product-based type stuff. So that's really the genesis of this conversation. Started about a year ago, as it's changing these grading percentages. And that's really where we're at right now. We also, we moved to honors and standard level courses. So many of the disciplines decided to differentiate how they grade those students. based on honors and standard. If we really want to be a college prep school, which I very much want that for this place, and I think everyone does, if we want to be a college prep school, we're not preparing students for that type of assessment by having assessments that don't at least somewhat mirror that, Now, I'm not saying we need to be a college, because we're not. I mean, the kids aren't collegiate quite yet, but I think we need to grab some of those things, that the components of what colleges do and how they assess their students, and try to get them ready for that by making these changes that we're trying to propose to make. So do you have any questions for me about anything?
I don't have any questions. Does anyone else? Well, I appreciate you coming, Mr. Cheek, and explaining everything. I think the idea and what you're presenting is very good, and it's a different way, I think, than some of the parents or teachers may be used to, but I think it's the way we need to go, to your point, to support the child going on to any kind of secondary education. This is the way they're going to be graded.
And I'm not reinventing the wheel. There's plenty of schools in North Carolina that are good schools that, we can look at and steal ideas from, and they can steal from us too, and back and forth. And I'll look at some of the best schools. I come from Guilford County. I was the math department chair there at Northern Guilford for 7 years. And at Northern, this is kind of the way, we didn't do it exactly this way, but this is a similar, where each subject kind of had their own grading protocol. Now, there was consistency within the grading protocol. So if you were a science teacher, then you agreed with the science teachers, the 8 teachers who were teaching science at that time there. They all agreed that, okay, this is what our tests are going to count. This is what our labs are going to count. This is what our, whatever tools they use for assessment, they all kind of agreed with that. And then I kind of looked over the fence at Northwest Guilford. Northwest Guilford is a top performing school. It's consistently top 50 year in, year out. Early college at Guilford is usually the #1 graded school in the state. I talked to Pete. Pete's a friend of mine. He's the principal over there, and I know some people over there. I also reached out to Chapel Hill High School. I mean, they're a stellar school. Chapel Hill, East Chapel Hill. I talked to a lady over there, and so what we're planning right here is kind of along the same lines as some of those other really good top 50, arguably top 50 performing schools in North Carolina. So it's not like we're going off and creating something that we don't know if this is going to work or hasn't been tested. I mean, other schools do this kind of normally and naturally.
Is all teachers on board with this?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We've all met together for over a year now and met individually in our departments, and decided and came up with those numbers and the percentages. And they were tasked to look at other counties, just like Mr. Cheek said, and I can attest to, he has reached out to curriculum directors, to principals, to the past couple of weeks since I asked him to do this. And, we Zoomed with a lady that was a curriculum director. So we've all done our research, and he has really stepped up and did that for us, and one-on-one contact with other people. And something else from scheduling purposes that I want to make sure that everybody is clear on is that just because we have the categories and the weights for standards versus honors, if we don't have the teacher to teach it, that's where we'll have to look at, well, how many of those students are honors versus standards, and then decide whether or not a course is honors or standards. So I just want to make sure that everybody's clear on that, and that not just because we're having honors and standards and APs of all of our subject areas, that doesn't mean that in a given year that they would all be offered. So just to make sure that y'all are clear with that.
All right, as a math teacher, I'm sure you've already recognized this, but it looks like the biggest impact are going to be on struggling students in English.
You're talking about the grade
Yeah,
differentials.
right. A struggling student in English, their grade would actually go up by 9 points. But the only other thing that I've noticed is that science is routinely on under every factor is down. Can you explain why science would be the one that's, everything else kind of averages out? The English, the struggling B student in English is, we can throw that one out because that's a big, it's kind of out of the ordinary. Everything else is just like a +2, +3. There's a +5 in there too. but in every single factor, science loses points. Can you explain why science, the grading is different for science? Go ahead.
I guess that would be me.
All right.
I'll take that one, because I'm the one that created it, well, not the only one. I personally, speaking to that would be, let me see, I'm trying to remember which kid in which class that I took it from, because I don't believe I took it from my own classes, because like he says, I mean, like I can shift all what I do and place them.
Oh, so this is just a couple of students?
Yeah, this is random.
Oh, this, okay, all
current
right.
kids,
Yeah,
and
that's
not
completely
necessarily-
different.
Yeah, not necessarily my students. So like my students, and I didn't include that data, I was trying to be unbiased. Their grades were about the same, because I hate to use the word manipulate the 42, 42, 16, but I make it fit to where I would have, you know, my tests in that category and my labs or the projects and stuff like that. So my kids were very similar. But then I had to go in when I did the data. I went, you know, say I went to a biology class. I don't remember which subject it was, where they only give, you know, a test or a workbook or something like that. And I had to pick and choose, well, what would be considered the lab, and try to make it as best as I could. And I will say that for me, you know, the lab grades are the big ones. And I think that's where, and too, this was a virtual year. But I think the labs are what is gonna be.
And
the
we're
biggest.
reducing or increasing the lab percentage?
Well, right now, currently, we don't have one.
Oh, you don't have one at all?
Well, that's the
one of the big
thing.
problems.
So I don't
Okay.
have a lab. So what do I do personally in my classroom is I put the labs as the quiz and project. And, so then that way that's at 42%. And for our class, depending on if it was standard or honors, the lab grade would be a 35% or 30%. Oh gosh, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And then their test grades for mine increased.
So
from
this
42
is
to
not like
50.
a dozen students, this is just a couple,
One.
it's just one,
Mhm.
okay, that,
Just a representative,
All right.
one student. So that's very loose
yeah,
predictability.
yeah, just one
Yeah.
student.
It's a very.
Yeah,
loose
every student's gonna be a
predictability.
little bit different.
That's
Correct, and that was why after I did it, and how long it took me to do all of that, and, you know, trying to pretend I was an English teacher, and how an English teacher, what would they put as a discussion, and looking at all their different classes, because I didn't want to add anything to the teacher's plates right now.
Yeah.
And tell them, hey, go into Canvas and pretend you had it that way. Lord knows probably someone wouldn't be able to do it, so I just took it upon myself to do it. And I probably shouldn't have said that, I'm sorry.
Well, you have to-
It's okay. So then after I did it, I called cheat, and I was like, look at this. It doesn't say much, you know, like, and then that was, like I said, that's where we got our conversations from.
You generated this, but then it made you take a deeper dive.
Right. And like I said, because when you presented that question, I was like, that isn't, like, why didn't I think to do this? That's excellent, you know, something to think about, to look at, just to see. And then after I did it, I was like, this doesn't really tell me anything. So then I went back to, you know, my people and asked them, like,
Well, I was thinking of, you know, some students just don't test good,
you're right.
but they're
absolutely.
bailed out by how the 42% of classwork and stuff like that. And I was worried that, you know, students that really don't test good, that's really gonna hurt them, because we're taking away some of that classwork percentage.
Right,
So I was looking to see how that would affect them.
right.
And if you guys have a plan to make sure that those students are taken care of, I'm satisfied.
Well, if
Absolutely.
I have a testing percentage that is what I want in my class, well, then I'm gonna also spend more time preparing my kids to get ready for the test, which is a bigger chunk of their grade. So it's not like, you know, if a test only counted 10%, why would I spend weeks and weeks and weeks preparing for a test when it's just a very low percentage? However, like if the test is gonna count a little more, then we're gonna talk more about that test. We're gonna talk about strategies for test preparation. We're gonna talk about strategies for, you know, when you're in the middle of a test, you know, so, you know, there's gotta be some support along with this too, and that's my plan all
And-
along.
It was going off of that too, it's like you have those students in your classroom, is this for a grade? Who cares? Mute point now, because even if it is for a grade, it's only 10% of your grade, and that's not gonna change hardly anything. Whereas a test being 50% of your grade, you're doing the classwork, the homework to prepare for that 50% test grade.
That's
And-
another reason why this data right here is, it was great to compile, but like a child's
Yeah, just one
concern
child
and
really
Yeah.
didn't
attitude
do it.
towards a certain component of a grade is gonna be a lot different if it was a 10% part or a 90% part or whatever. I mean, a child's gonna work a lot harder on the 90% part.
I think you're gonna see better engagement, because they're going to realize as this gets implemented and they start to see how it impacts their grade and everything, that a child's going to be more engaged in making sure that, hey, I need to listen today because this is going to be on this test, which is, almost 50% of my grade. So I need to pay attention. I think that comprehension is going to get better. And I think the students that don't test well, I think they'll get better, because I think they're going to have that opportunity to understand and ask the questions and sit and try to move through those activities that is preparing them for the test.
Right.
And to personally in my class, say I do remediation, and if the student makes lower than a 70, which is what I set as my proficiency level, is I encourage them highly to complete a remediation assignment. And that varies different. I give them options, they have 6 options, they can put 4, and I even do that now in virtual and Canvas. And if a student fails a test, it's not an option. You will do remediation. And in that, I bring that whatever test grade is up to like an 80 or an 85, just depending on the course, like honors or standard. So like Mr. T said, preparing our teachers for this type of change and offering them PD with like how to do remediation strategies for those students that don't test well. I think will be a big component in this as well.
Look at the old one too. The old one has 42% for classwork and projects. Look to think about that. In a given 9 weeks, that's a 45 days thing. Okay, I'm just making things up here. But if you were a teacher who, let's say, out of 45 days, you graded classwork 40 of them because you do classwork every day or so, and then you had 2 projects in that quarter. Well, now you've graded 40 classworks and 2 projects, and all those are going to be lumped into this 42%. That means each one of those, the project counts 1%.
Devalues the project.
Things, and you can't control that without having to tweak it, the scale factor in Power School, and then I feel like I'm doing something that's maybe not as transparent as it should be, but I'm just trying to make the grades right. Literally, if I'm going to do 40 classwork assignments and 2 projects, clearly you want the projects to carry a little bit more weight, right?
Right.
That should show more mastery of content than just individual classwork. Well, with the current grade scale, that doesn't happen, because you pour them all into one big 42%, and they're all equally weighted across the board, and then you fudge things. And, that's where I'm coming from with it too.
Well, all of it.
Yeah, all of it come from that same spot.
Thank you all.
Yeah, any other
Thank you.
questions or comments?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Quick minute, brag very often that these individuals right here, I'm gonna take just a second, they are carrying a very heavy load. Each one of them do things way outside of what's described in their contract. So I just want to shout out these guys. They spend a lot of hours, a lot of time, and a lot of weight is on their shoulders. They are leaders in many of our committees, sit in on academics committee, which is a big one that we work on to try to prepare our kids and try to improve our instruction. So, you talk about having the right people in the right places. I will shout these 3 individuals out, Ms. Reagan, Mr. Cheek, and Ms. Taylor. Again, Ms. Taylor, she don't want me to call her up here to be in front of y'all, okay? She's like quiet behind the scenes, but speaks up when she needs to. So I just want you to know that I know, but I want you to know how much time these individuals spend on making Clever Garden better than best. That was our hashtag last year, kind of continued it on this year a little bit, but they truly have Clever Garden School with the best interest and in their heart. So anyway, when I get a chance to brag on you, I'm going
Well,
to
it shows.
speaks for itself.
Absolutely.
Well, we appreciate y'all.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any further questions, or are we ready to vote?
Yep.
Do I have a motion to accept the proposed grade, category, and weights updates for middle school and high school?
I'm making that.
Ms. Foster, second. Mr. Brooks, all in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you all.
Ms. Reagan, Mr. Chief, and Ms. Taylor, I appreciate your hard work.
You're welcome.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
You're welcome.
Merry Christmas.
Now go get
Merry
some,
Christmas.
now go get some rest.
That's right.
These are our night owls. They're
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank y'all.
Understand
Bye,
that.
guys.
Thank you.
4.8. Castle County, we're sitting at about 10.8%. Last month, we were at 8.3. And then now currently in Guilford County, we're sitting at 8.7%. And last month, that was 6.6. So as you can see, across the board, there's been some increase there. So those are quite alarming figures and numbers and percentages. But that's just to kind of give you an update. That is on the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. They have a dashboard where you can track this information. The state also released this county document, and they were like, hey, we're just going to do that by month. Well, lately they've been trying to update that at least every week, every 2 weeks, just to kind of keep us in the loop of, who's at the highest risk for spread, okay? So those are key indicators. I'm going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to refer back to this a little bit later, but I did want to give you the most current up-to-date metrics on that. She also included in this one case trends, so you can kind of look at that for the 3 counties. And on page 4, yep, page 4 with the green. This was something that Dr. Vaughn shared with our staff, which was quite interesting. Is they're pulling predictions and estimates, based on information. This is from scientists, and I just thought this was interesting just to take a look at. So when she presented to our staff, November 20th, I think it was that Friday before Thanksgiving. The peak was supposed to hit around January of projected cases. If you look at that first table, it looks like it's pushed back a little bit more towards February. So that's that's an updated projection that they are saying. And then the projections down there below, they say that the deaths are always about a month behind getting that information. And so we are projected to have the most deaths recorded between February and March. So very, very alarming information, but I appreciate her gathering this information just so that we have a true, transparent view of kind of what's going on. But this is just updates for you to kind of keep in mind. Okay, and just write your questions down for those. Like I said, she'll do a Q&A with you here in just a little while, okay? Okay, so other updates. And we picked because updates are changing by the day, by the minute. Again, I picked with you a couple months ago. This is current as of December 8th, 2020 at 6 o'clock, right? Or 7 o'clock, whatever time it is now. But so this is up to date right now. This is the most recent. So if you take a look, we are now on the athletic updates. So what she did, this is from Coach. Coach has a Zoom conference right now with some parents and coaches. So she cannot be here with us. So I'm going to do my best job of summarizing this for her. But if you would, take a look. She highlighted in yellow, these are some additional updates that were made to the manual that we had shared before. This is just updates from the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. But pay particular attention to the red. This is a big one. So what we've discussed recently is that the North Carolina High School Athletic Association has now passed a rule that masks are mandated. So we are looking at basketball, okay? So we had agreed and approved that, basketball is getting ready to boot up here. I think it was December 21st, or practice would start and, we're ready to get going. But this is a current mandate that kids playing sports, especially basketball, will be required to wear a mask the entire time. Now, this is different than what we had before. Originally, it was the spectators, if you're sitting on the bench, but if you were actually playing, you didn't have to wear your mask. Everybody else did. So this is a huge, significant change. So Coach is a little torn on athletics right now because of the cardio, basically, that's involved with basketball, running up and down the court. Like I said, we're losing our breath talking.
Are you talking about active players?
Yes, during the game.
Like you go to do a layup and you wear a mask. You shoot a free throw, you wear a mask. You
Well,
put the ball
and the
in,
red,
you
it
wear a
says
mask.
for skill development. That doesn't sound like a game, that's like practice.
So as of now, according to Coach in the documents, that's what they have to do if they're playing now. Now, this is just recent that was released. Now, here's where some of the caveat I think is coming in. There will be, well, more than likely there will be a waiver, okay? So if you get a medical diagnosis that you don't have to wear a mask, they will have to fill that out and then the kids wouldn't have to wear that. But that is up in the air right now. because once this passed, everybody was like, oh my goodness, like, that's totally different playing basketball, having to wear a mask the entire time. And so that is a big piece of what they're looking at now. Coach's biggest concern with this is with the kids having to wear a mask, simply the fear of the kids passing out, health injuries.
Yeah.
Those are some real valid concerns of having to do that. She has made some recommendations, if this is something that we do decide, we talk about later, we decide that, we are gonna move forward, that we look at potentially hiring or paying a first responder to be on site, during the games and practices and things like that. But it's just, there's a lot of unknown there, and we don't know what's gonna happen with the mask mandate. That's what it is currently. So, she wanted me to make sure I kind of honed in on that, because that was new information. So the other thing I asked her, I said, okay, let's put that aside for now. How many, teams are actually participating in our conference, right? So if you look at the numbers up there, so our middle school conference, only 2 out of 5 teams have agreed to have a season this year to play, okay?
We'll be playing each other a lot.
Is that including this new rule?
That
Could
could
change?
potentially
That could
change.
change.
This was as of, I guess, this morning when she sent it to me. But then the high school conference playing basketball, there's 5 out of 8 that have signed up, that have said, yeah, we'll play. Some of these are like, no, if we're still remote, we're not playing. Some of them have been, you know what, it's not even worth it. They kind of made that decision. So those are just that's just some information for us to think about and kind of mull over a little bit. But those were kind of the highlights. Just the big piece of the face mask was new and a bit alarming, to be quite honest with you. So those are some concerns that we've got with athletics. And if you turn the page, your page 8. Yes, I'm sorry, I gave you all the nice number copies and I've got my original. So on page 8, this is interim guidance that we got actually from the Department of Health and Human Services, just so you can kind of see where they're coming from. We get updates on this usually every 2 weeks. They'll try to send out some updated guidance. But if you take a look, like the green, they are in support, right? They can maintain social distancing. Close contact is limited. Those are like your more individualized sports. So if you see, like those are, they feel comfortable with your, like I said, badminton, golf, swimming, those kind of things where you don't have to interact necessarily that closely and be in close contact with others. The yellow there is, hey, you know what? This is kind of self-explanatory. Please exercise caution. Make sure that you've got all your mitigation in place with the distancing and the face coverings, etc. So they're a little more flexible with this. This is kind of where our volleyball stuff has come in. When they start talking about volleyball, and there's contact, but there's not direct contact necessarily as frequently as some of these other sports.
And the other team's on the other side of the net.
Right, so you're still kind of separated, but yeah, I could see the running into each other and going after the ball. But if you turn over to the next page, that's where the red comes in, and the Department of Health and Human Services does not recommend these types of sports. Okay, now they can't tell you can or can't, right? But they are pretty much giving you their expert advice
So we're
on
not
how
gonna
this
have
is
pair
working.
speakers.
Huh?
We're not gonna have pair speaker skating.
No, I'm not. I was so disappointed. I was like, what happened with figure skating?
This was our year.
Our year to go to state.
Oh, but if you look at those, basketball falls right in there in
Yeah.
that category because of the contact. So just things for us to kind of mull over, kind of think about as a board. I know how badly we want athletics. I know how badly we want our kids to have some sense of normalcy, but at the same point, making sure we're looking at all of the factors here before we, finalize and begin practice and things like that. So we are still operating that, hey, it's going to happen. But then when we get updated information, it kind of makes us kind of think twice about that. So those are some updates there. If you have any questions about those, just let me know and I'll pass those on to the coach. All right. So the next page,
10 or
11 is band updates.
Band 11.
All right, so we've been kind of holding down on band, like we've been kind of going back and forth. Well, this morning, Mr. Babb sent me an update. He said, hey, they finally gave us some updated guidance. Here we go. So this right here, so they updated this in our strong schools, North Carolina toolkit. So that's that document I tell you keeps changing, and then they keep putting the updates behind the table of contents. So I won't read all of these to you. You can kind of review these, but it talks about band and it talks about choir. So we've started having discussions about, what will specials look like? What will electives look like when we come back to school? So some of these are what we've talked about before, but it does say, hey, if you can be outside, right? But if you have to be inside, there we go with the plexiglass stuff again, the masks again. And so at least at this point, they're trying to offer you some alternatives versus saying don't do it at all. So they see the importance of that as well. But a big piece is trying to separate everybody, trying to keep them as like you said, as social distance as possible, making them keep their masks on, things like that. So I thought that was nice that like now we're starting to talk about how to make it happen. How can we potentially do this? And then if you are inside, maximizing the distance, trying to be in a larger space so they're not real close to each other, those kind of things. So these are just some updates for us to consider, because I know tonight we're going to talk about the proposed schedules that Mr. Babb shared with you to try to mimic kind of what we were doing with athletics. So just more things for us to kind of think over and kind of decide if that's something that we want to continue to move forward with in the future there. So,
I know we talked about instrument masks for bands, so I'm not seeing that as a requirement. So did that change or?
I don't think it's a requirement. I think it's just a suggestion or a recommendation. So a lot of that stuff in that material is here's recommended and here's required. And so no, it does not say required right now. It just says like I said, that the conversations has been recommended. It would just be an additional mitigation that you would put into place.
And like if can they do it like in a circle, everybody facing out? Instead of stacked right in front of one another and just blowing on the back of the guys in front of your head,
Yeah. So
something like that.
So what I'm looking at and what he sent to me, because he kind of sent me the highlights, and this is without me looking at the updated guidance, but that they can be in the same place together, just trying to make sure you've got the proper distance between each other, make sure that you're disinfected. Same thing with those plexiglass dividers. And like I said, they just keep reinforcing the 6 feet. Anything to reduce respiratory droplet transmission. There's that. We can talk a little bit more about kind of what we want that to look like as well. All right, so this next document is pretty big. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights in here. So you guys approved for us to start our focus groups back in October. We started in November, and they have been incredibly beneficial for our kids. So those kids that were at high risk, just struggling to stay on top of their studies, on top of their work, didn't have that supervision at home to kind of help them with that. It has been really, really beneficial for our kids, for our families, and for our teachers. They're finally getting participation from kids that we haven't seen them all year. So that has been really beneficial. So what our group has done, and I'm going to shout out Ms. Quimby, Ms. Garrison, and Ms. Robin on this. These folks are running these focus groups. So remember, we have 3 that are operating right now. So we've got childcare for our faculty and staff during the day, which has been phenomenal. They have praised y'all graciously for that, so they can actually work and their child's working at the same time. Our focus groups for academics is overseen, like I said, by Ms. Quimby, and then we have an EC group that's running as well. So our kids are getting their related services on site. So those are awesome opportunities for our kids. So what we want to do is continue this. It's working. Let's don't stop. We did have our very first, and I sent it to you, we did have our very first positive case of COVID-19 on campus. So those were, unfortunately, you don't want that to happen, but it was phenomenal practice for us. We had a limited number of kids, and because we were in pods, the limit of exposure was so much smaller. So that really was a huge benefit to us. And the fact that our staff and our faculty have been listening, they have followed the instructions that we have shared with COVID-19 preventing the spread and the mitigation practices. So very proud of them because the group that was exposed was really, really small. So that was fantastic. So those are just some things that have also been beneficial for us that we want to continue. So they did it two ways for me. They did it, hey, things are great. All the K2 kids are coming back like scheduled. We're good. And then they did another version if something were to happen, metrics, like I said, go to higher. And we decided we're not comfortable bringing K2 back. Two different options for us. So basically just kind of the major changes. Okay, if you want to look at some of the academic data to support this continuation. I'm sorry, I have to
15, is this what you're doing?
academic data.
17.
17?
17?
I was on fast.
Oh, we behind.
Hold on a minute, one.
Behind.
3, 4. It's number 5 after this one, after the blue one. Academic, yep, that's it.
17.
It's got percentages on it for you. So that'll kind of show you the percent of focus group students that had an increase in one or more courses. So that was 87%. That's huge,
Wow.
huge. 50% of our kids in these focus groups are now passing a course that they were not passing at the end of Q1. And we've also had a 30%, 36% increase in submission on Canvas just within the first week of being in this group. And so this has just been across the board a great thing. And so we are greatly appreciative that you guys have let us do this. So then again, on the next page, additional data that just kind of shows you our elementary students, our middle school students, and our high school students. You can kind of see the jumps there. Once we were able to put this in place, how much action we were getting from our online platform that we didn't have before. And then if you get to the what, so it says the what, January 4th is K2 does return. So these are just some of the changes that they would like to make. So we would want to increase, since we'd be back on campus for our K2s, they'd be running a Monday through Friday schedule. Right now, we are running Monday through Thursday with our focus groups, and we would like to increase that to Monday through Friday and change the hours a little bit. So they're coming in at 9 now, and they're leaving at 1. So we want to change it to 8 to 12. It's the same schedule that our K2 kids would be on, just a little more consistency there. And then they want to increase the number of kids that are in these focus groups because they're working so well. And then, you know, they want to increase this because we have a ton of kids on a waiting list trying to get into these groups. That would be so beneficial. Like, it would be so beneficial for them to get into this group. We just don't have room. We're trying to keep the group small. Well, in January, all the staff is back. We've got everybody scheduled to come back in, so we would have more hands on deck to be able to do some of this stuff. So it would increase from around 30 kids to about 55 kids. So again, using those core teachers, that kind of help. So if you look at the little timelines she created here, this kind of shows you. So, you know, in January, when we come back, you know, it's all of our K2 kids plus these focus groups. All right. Then coming in February, you know, we're projected to bring in our 35 kids. Then we would have these focus groups on campus, and then eventually have everybody back. So those are just some visuals for you to kind of see that. So,
So everything, according to this, is the same, these three blocks here, in addition to these two, correct?
yes.
Okay.
Yep. So those are the focus groups they're working on, and they want to add some more kids. They want to open them up. So like
Like, so you're supplementing addition or adding core groups.
Now, the
Focus groups.
K2 students that are currently in the program,
Yeah.
they would come out of the program and go to the regular
they would go to
classes.
school.
Right.
like normal.
That way we wouldn't be intermixing the two.
Exactly.
Okay.
We put a lot of thought, and I'll talk about that a little bit here in just a minute, but Councilman Ellis has put a lot of thought into what that's going to look like for our K2 kids, how we're going to keep everybody in pods by grade level and things like that. So yes, those kids would move over to their normal classes. But we want it, that way we're still serving those, you know, 3rd through 12th graders that still need it but are not on campus.
How many K-2 students do you have in the program?
So, off the top of my head,
15.
yeah, I was gonna say that's a
No, that's
small,
elementary.
they've got,
You went from
there's a
90,
very small group in K2, there's probably 4 in
you went
there.
from 90 to 210, so that's,
120.
yeah, 100.
Yeah,
120.
you're adding it, like I said, you're adding more to your 3-5, your middle school group and your high school group.
Right.
So this right here, Brett,
The student totals on the next page. So that's where your difference comes from, is adding those grade levels. But they've done a great job of keeping those groups really small, but one-on-one. So especially with our younger kids. So that would be the only change or update. And then they also did something, if they don't return, they want to have the opportunity to bring in additional kids because we're still trying to keep the group small, especially if we have K2 back on campus. Because that's about 150 kids that are coming on site. So they're still trying to, manage all the kids that we have on site. So if the K2 kids weren't on campus in January, and then we decided not to bring them back, they would want to increase by 25 kids. So that we would just increase, like I said, by 25 to bring in those extra kids, since we don't have somebody on campus anymore. They've done a great job, like I said, with that, and managing that, to make sure that we have enough coverage, we have enough screeners. And those kids are, like I said, they're not getting direct instruction right now, but just having somebody supervise you, just having somebody look over your shoulder and say, no, you didn't submit that, try again, or no, that format doesn't work, you gotta resave it, or those kind of things that these kids really struggle with.
They still have the option to stick with remote learning if they choose not to come on campus.
You got it, and
Okay.
that's what's next on our list.
Oh, okay.
So the next update for you is our return to school survey. So this was the survey that we sent out to our K2 families. And so what I did was just kind of give you a synopsis of what we're looking at, so you guys kind of know what our population wants, and what they're requesting. So the first question is, when returning to school, my student will be. So the red one is attending school, so coming on campus for face-to-face, and the blue is staying remote. So if you look at that, about 81% of our families in K through 2 will be sending their kids back to school. And then about 18.9% of our families will be keeping their kids remote. So what the K2 teachers are doing right now, they have sent me rosters so that we know exactly who's in their class and who's not. Are they going to have a full class of 25 or is it going to be 20 because 5 are remote? So they're kind of working on that right now. And then the second piece there we were concerned about was we wanted to be able to offer the after-school option to our families, but also make sure we have enough people to staff it and things like that. So looking at the bottom there, so this is the opportunity, do you need after school? Because we're doing the half days, we're getting out at 12 o'clock. So do you need childcare from 12 to 6? So if you look at this, blue is yes, so about 21% said yes, we'll need it, which I think accounted to about 25-ish kids. And then 78% said no, I'm good, I'll come get my kid at 12 o'clock. So that's given us some information right now. We're working on all the logistics of running our after-school program, but keeping kids in pods so that they're small in cohorts, so that we don't have any unnecessary mixing of grade levels. So we're working on that right now, make sure we're staffed for that. But that's a survey for K2. The same survey will go out to 3-5 as well, so we can start getting that information together as well. But that won't go out in January. And last but not least, so health and wellness, we met yesterday for an update and sort of run over some of our metrics, some of our information, things like that. So in the end of our conversation, we kind of started discussing again. I know we talked about this last month, but we were kind of like, no, we're fine, we're good, let's come back on January 4th. But after looking at the current metrics and then looking at the projections by the experts who look at this data for a living, it made us a little concerned about the holidays and the spikes. And so we just want to potentially revisit this as an option. Still want to bring kids back in January. Still feel good about that, but also want to protect everybody. So they would like to make a proposal to an addendum. So an addendum to what you approved for the K2 kids. So originally we said, hey, K2, we're going to come back on January 4th. But looking at the metrics and kind of information we're getting from Thanksgiving, we would like to propose that instead of the K2 coming back on January 4th, that they actually come back on January 19th. And that's not everybody. That would just be kindergarten. Okay, that's the Martin Luther King Junior Day is on Monday, and so this would be that Tuesday that week in January. That would give us our 14-day quarantine window from the holidays, Christmas and New Year's. And then, like I said, we also feel better about that because we've also put some procedures in place for our staff members with travel policies and things like that, and trying to keep them safe as well. So making sure we have all of our staff cleared and ready to be back in the building as well will be very important. But mostly for these families that are traveling, that hopefully, are being as safe as possible. But what we would like to do is kind of stagger them. So normally kindergarten, so this is going to be, we talked about this a lot yesterday. This is going to be a huge adjustment for our kindergartners. This is going to be big. They've never been to school before. This is their real experience in school. It's going to be a big adjustment for our teachers because these kids, have not experienced rules of a classroom and things like that. So what we would like to do is that's a 4-day that's a 4-day week. So if we did half the kindergarten classes on Tuesday, the other half on Wednesday, which is very similar to what we've done in the past when we stagger kindergarten in anyways. And then on Thursday, you'd have all your kindergartners there, but you'd bring in first grade. Then on Friday, you'd have all your kindergarten, all your first grade, and then you'd have all of your second graders there as well. The reason that we're asking for this proposed change is because one, of course, for the holidays, trying to get people to quarantine, but also it would build in some transition time for our staff. We've done screenings, but we've done them for a small group of kids. We're bringing 150 kids back on campus. We want to make sure that the kinks are worked out and the issues are worked out, and this would give us a little bit of time because you'd have a smaller group of kids on campus at a given time. So kindergarten comes back, we're bringing back half of them. There's 30. There's the other 30. Here's all 60 plus first grade. So just would give us some opportunity there to kind of work the kinks out and allow that transition for our littles to come back to school as well. So I know that pushes us out 2 weeks. I know we were ready to hit the ground running January 4th. But just based on the metrics and getting some feedback from the group, they felt much more confident returning on the 19th, because that's kind of our plan is to have all staff back, not just K2. So we're going to have all hands on deck to help and with the transition.
So how do you determine the half of the kindergarten students?
So they've done it by last names before, like in years past. They've been like, okay, A through M, you're returning on this date. That depends on how many kids there are and where their last names fall. But that's kind of how we've done it in the past. The reason we've done it as a smaller group is because kindergarten's a lot to handle. So it's for anybody that's not been with us on the first day of school for kindergartners, please join us hopefully on this 19th. It's a lot, but it's just very busy. Kids don't want to get out of the car. They've been with mom, now even worse because they've been with mom and dad. So it's going to be a transition to get all of them back. So it's just easier. And then we've had a lot of good experience with slowly rolling them in. And that way, then they're all, you bring them in half and half, and then everyone comes back. The way we usually do that in school, normal school year, we come back on Tuesday. They don't come on Tuesday. Half comes on Wednesday, half comes on Thursday, and then they all come on Friday for pizza day. That's kind of what our routine has been. And that's been really beneficial for our teachers because there's a lot of needs. They don't know what they're getting. And so by doing it on a smaller, more individualized basis, by the third day, we either got it or we don't. So those are kind of some of the requests there from the Health and Wellness Committee. Just based on metrics. So that is just our proposal. I would like for us to potentially discuss in a little while. And that's it for my updates.
Any other items or information for open session?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I understand we have quite a few items for closed session. Do I have a motion on General Statute 14318.11A1 to move into closed session? Mr. Heffines, second. Ms. Foster, all in favor? Please note the time as 7:31, moving into closed session.